March the 8th Committee of the Whole meeting to order and acknowledge that the meeting is taking place on unceded Algonquin territories. And I would like to thank the Algonquin nations for hosting the meeting on their land. And with that, I'd like to call for a mover to approve the agenda. Trustee Lyra, thank you very much. And are there any changes to this agenda? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on the agenda. All those in favor? And opposed? And that passes. Thank you very much. And moving on to item number 3 in our agenda, and that is delegations. And we have 3 delegations this evening. 1 4-minute and 2 2-minute delegations. And I would like to remind the delegations that because of where we are in our program, that your delegations are timed. And if you exceed the delegations, I'll have to remind you to, or exceed your time, I will have to remind you to wrap it up. And so with that, we'll start with our 4-minute delegation. James Graham, are you with us this evening, James?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you have 4 minutes, James.
Yeah, can you start me in this one, just 1 second, please? Let me just try to share something with you, if I may. Host disabled paired screen sharing. Can you enable that, please?
We'd rather not, James. Can you go through it?
I can, but that wasn't, why have we changed the rules and procedures to not allow us to share?
I don't know. If you could go through your
well, I can, but I mean, I should be given the ability to share my screen. We've done this in the past. I don't see why I wouldn't be able to now. Can you please enable?
Just a minute, please.
Yeah.
Trustee Scott, can you clarify that? Did we make that decision? I can't remember.
I believe that in the past, what has happened is that some of our delegations have provided PowerPoints to board services who have been able then to screen share those. I imagine that Executive Officer Giroux or Manager Guthrie could confirm that.
I shared last time just to confirm that.
Executive Officer.
For you, Mr. Chair, historically, our practice was to receive all materials from delegations in advance of the meetings. We did early on in our meetings allow for some screen sharing, and we have reverted to a practice where we need to have that information in advance because it allows us to manage the meeting a little bit better. And so delegates are asked to make that request in advance so that we know and can be prepared for it.
Yeah, that's substantially different information that wasn't communicated to me. Do we have that in policy? Is that written in policy that I can review?
Do you wish to proceed with your delegation, Mr. Graham?
Well, I do, but I wish to be able to present with the material that I've spent time to prepare.
Right, and may I suggest that in the future that if you send it to us in advance, then it can be shared. This is, after all, a public forum, Mr. Graham. So are you?
Yeah, fair enough. I would have done that had anybody made that aware to me. Now I'm not going to have the opportunity to do that. So that's disappointing. Okay, I will continue, and then we'll share my slide materials to you afterwards.
You can certainly send it to us afterwards, Mr. Graham.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair, Director, and trustees for the time to address you this evening. I'm sorry. Can I share my video?
Yes, open your video if you wish.
Okay. Sorry again. Thank you, Chair, Director, and Trustees for the time to address you this evening. I'm here today to insist that you move to immediately review all COVID-19 pandemic policies. In doing so, I wish to remind you of your duties, that is to provide a positive education to our children. I am not alone in my efforts to convince this board that mask requirements and mandatory vaccine policy should never have been proposed or ratified. The public record of written and verbal delegations to this board provided ample evidence to refute the recommendations provided by public health spokespeople. At this time, none of our efforts have had any effect on the people entrusted with our children. What are we doing to our children when we force them to wear masks all day at school? Do you think the risks associated with the wearing of dirty and toxic masks is worth it? What of the many children who know full well that the masks are useless? You might think that you have their best interests at heart, but we cannot reconcile that with reality. It's time to be honest about our role in this charade. The trustees in this board have the power to undo what we all must admit has been an awful history of failed efforts to combat a virus that people unreasonably fear, and as a result are willing to do anything that adds to a farcical show of fighting its spread. I might remind you that any and all policies were enacted with the mindset of COVID-0, completely eliminating a virus. We cannot deny that this is no longer attainable. The specific directives of the Trustee Governance Policy, Section 3.2 states that appropriate channels of consultation and input shall be built into policy development, evaluation, and review. I request that we accelerate this process and allow for an immediate review of all pandemic-based policies that have been approved by this board. It is inappropriate to continue to use OPH as the only source of guidance when it is clear that their recommendations were never supported by peer-reviewed research and had nothing to do with public health. This cannot be further condoned by this board, and I ask you to sincerely consider this truth. What is the stated benefit of mandatory masks in schools? It's a fact that the masks do nothing to prevent viral transmission. It even clearly states this on the box. Do you disagree with the manufacturers? Do you disagree with the peer-reviewed studies where none find any statistical significant benefit of face masks? As policymakers, you have adopted a policy of don't ask, don't question when it comes to the information provided by public health agencies, specifically the OPH. In ratifying and or enforcement of these policies, you choose to ignore the guiding principles as educators. And I quote, "Successful practices are founded on evidence-based research tempered by experience." It's time to do what is right for our children and quit the meaningless pandemic charade. It's time to remove all OCDSB policies and demand any ministry policies be removed immediately. It has been 2 years of your compliance with this. It's been 2 years of egregious restrictions and lockdowns that have failed. Now that it's clear beyond doubt that the board's vaccine policies do not in any way protect the health of students or staff, it's necessary for this board to repeal the staff and visitor vaccine policies. This is the moral and correct action that we expect you will move quickly to rectify. Mandates, including provincial government employees, are being dropped all over the world. It's time for the OCDSB to catch up. It shouldn't be alarming to demand a return to normal. Asymptomatic spread of airborne virus is a myth. Testing asymptomatic people without any need and requiring perfectly healthy people to isolate is asinine. It's time to return to normal, a time when if we were sick, we would stay at home, a time when we took personal responsibility for our well-being, a time when we didn't fear the coming flu season. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. And we do have a question from Trustee Ellis.
Thank you. You mentioned that you refute public health, and you've mentioned a number of times in your documentation that you don't trust that information. Who do you think we should, who would you recommend if it's not the Ontario Public Health?
Well, I actually asked in my written delegation that you would provide or consider the idea.
Excuse me, sir, you're not answering my question. Who would you think that we should listen to?
I think you need to look at the evidence, some of which
Sir,
is.
my question, and I'm gonna ask
Trustee
you the
Ellis,
last time,
Trustee Ellis,
the last time I've asked.
let him answer,
who-
Trustee Ellis, please.
He's not answering me those, Chair. I'm not
He
gonna
can-
give him a platform. I don't
We
need
can't-
an
we can't-
answer. I
We
don't
can't
need an
mandate
answer,
he answer
Chair.
your question.
So my answer is that we can clearly see, like, for example, like if I was showing you my presentation material, there are people
Sorry,
that
you're
are
not telling me-
attending
Excuse me,
Super
sir.
Bowl
Excuse me, sir.
2022.
Chair.
That's enough, Trustee Ellis.
2,000 people in
No,
the stadium.
Chair, he's
Okay.
not answering
There
my
are no
question. I don't
Please,
need to hear
please
anymore.
mute both Trustee Ellis and Mr. Graham. This delegation is over. Thank you very much. And moving on, we have Christine Guptill. Are you with us today, Ms. Guptill? Yes, you are. Thank you very much. I apologize for the previous incident. If you could, you have 2 minutes. If you could go ahead. Ms. Guptill, are you there? I can see your picture.
I am. Thank you. Yep.
So go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
I am. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off my video feed because I could hear it at the same time. Thank you. I want to respond to this. Now is not the time to drop mask mandates, particularly in schools. I'm an OCDSB parent, a professor in occupational therapy at Ottawa, and I belong to Masks for Canada. It's a grassroots group of healthcare workers, academics, and other professionals who advocate for evidence-based and equitable public health measures. We do not accept any funding or endorse any products or political parties. Mask use has been very effective in reducing the impact of this pandemic on Canadians. When combined with high vaccination rate, masks can help to mitigate future waves of variants. I'll be happy to send a copy of my delegation with references after the meeting. We know that vaccination can protect us against serious illness and death, and there is some data about its ability to protect against long COVID. Vaccines can also help to reduce transmission, especially if we as adults have our third doses. But who's not vaccinated? Children and babies under age 5, cancer patients, people who are immune compromised, and who's under vaccinated? Only 55% of Ontario kids 5 to 11 have had 2 doses of vaccine. Only 10% of 12 to 17-year-olds have had a booster. Only 36% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 45% of 30 to 39-year-olds, and 52% of 40 to 49-year-olds. These are the parents of our school-age children have had a booster. We know that there's been confusion about the spread of COVID in schools. Dr. Theresa Tam has acknowledged that COVID does indeed spread in schools. Even if kids don't typically get as sick as adults do, this does not, unfortunately, mean that they can't spread COVID. In addition, we aren't able at this point to predict who does and who does not develop long COVID. Sadly, the UK provides us with a compelling example of what happens when a large number of children who are unvaccinated are exposed to Omicron. 7 to 8% of children ages 2 to 16 reported continued symptoms, with specialty services for those children costing the UK £1 million to set up. So, in summary, masks are simple and effective at preventing transmission and infection of COVID virus. They will keep our healthcare system from being overwhelmed and will keep our kids at school and their families at work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guptill. And we do have some questions of clarification from some of our trustees.
Thank you, Chair. It's Dr. Guptill. Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Guptill.
Sorry.
Did you call on me, Chair?
Yes, I did. Trustee
Okay,
Guptill.
great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Guptill, for your presentation. And I really appreciate clarifying that you are part of an organization that doesn't receive benefits from any specialty organization or political organization, because I think what we're talking about right now is a political agenda. And so that is driving many decisions. And so with that, my clarification question for you, Doctor, is with regard to the type of evidence that you would point us as trustees, who are all not health professionals, to look at. I appreciate you giving that recommendation, but if there are other organizations such as the Children's Health Coalition that you would point us to look for the science behind making these very important decisions, I would very much appreciate that. And thank you again for your delegation.
Thank you so much, Trustee Bell. Yes, certainly I would follow the trusted academics in the field. So I am an academic. So to be clear, the doctor isn't medical doctor, the doctor is PhD doctor. So, you know, if any of you who have studied with professors, you know that 40% of our job is actually about research and about consuming research and producing research. So certainly I would follow the trusted organizations. You know, there are some, you know, disagreements among people about details. But listen, the Children's Health Coalition is a great organization, you know, to follow in this. If we agree with what CHEO is talking about and what Sick Kids is talking about and what public health is talking about, and all of them are saying that now is not the time to drop a mask mandate, this is who we should be listening to. And unfortunately, what we do know is that we're seeing some influence of politics in terms of what public health is doing. And we've seen, unfortunately, our public health follow the example of the provincial public health officer. And that is unfortunate. But even Dr. Moore is saying we're looking at 20,000 cases a day right now. I don't see why that's a good time to test this theory. Our cases have plateaued. They're not going down further right now. And we know that. And it's not a good time to test it. I would suggest we wait until we've got more evidence to indicate that there's a reason to drop it, and watch some other jurisdictions and see what they're going through to get our evidence for that.
Thank you very much. And moving on to Trustee Fisher for questions or clarification.
Yeah, thanks, Keith, and thanks for the delegation, Dr. Guptill. I guess the question I have for you is, you know, I certainly throughout the pandemic have been trying to read as much and pay attention as much as I can to what's happening not only in Canada, but what's happening in the US, Israel, UK, you know, other sort of peer jurisdictions, trying to sort of read the latest trends in terms of the academic research. And I might be getting ahead of myself in sort of asking you this question, but I know states of California, which is a comparable size to Canada population-wise, and other jurisdictions are starting to think about what an endemic strategy looks like. And I'm just wondering if your organization has started to give any thought whatsoever about what does an effective endemic strategy look like. Do you see masks, you know, being a critical feature of that, or do you see an endemic strategy that looks different in terms of those mitigation measures? I know it's getting a bit ahead of sort of where we are right now, but while we have you here, I'm just curious to know if you're giving any thought to sort of what does an endemic strategy look like as it relates to masking?
We certainly are. Thank you so much for the question. Endemicity is a little bit of a complicated issue, and we're stretching a bit beyond my undergrad course in epidemiology at this point. My expertise is more in occ health and safety than it is in this area. So, you know, to be fair, we're not there, as you point out, we're not at endemicity yet. And the reason that we can say that we're not is people not only can still be reinfected with this virus, but we've still got lots of other variants on the horizon. So if you've heard of BA2 in the media, you can go and Google that. We've got another Omicron variant on the horizon. So unfortunately, we're not there yet. But you know, we do see masks as part of our future, you know, occasional putting masks on, taking masks off. When we're indoors as Canadians for large periods of time, masks may be needed when we've got periods where we've got higher numbers like we do right now. You know, we haven't really come down to a point where with the vaccine rates high, where we'd be willing to sort of suggest that that's our next step. And this is our problem, is we've been doing really well with vaccines, but we're really petering off, and we're petering off in the groups that are in schools is the problem. So our students are just not at the rate where we really need them to be with such an infectious virus as Omicron. We're talking about we would need to be at higher than 90% to really feel comfortable with that. And we're just not there. And so until we see public policy pushing the kinds of actions like more vaccines, we probably need to continue to wear masks until we feel a little bit more comfortable, and particularly with those vulnerable groups.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for your ongoing advocacy. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for the question.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your delegation, Dr. Guptill.
Thank
And
you.
moving on to our third delegation, Dowd Aiden. Are you with us this evening, Dowd? Hello, Dowd.
Hey, how are you?
You're with us this evening?
Yes, yes. How are you doing?
I'm great. So you have
You
2
know,
minutes
my partner spoke with you the other time, Adam.
Yes.
Yes, you're a good man.
Oh, well, thank you very much. But you have 2 minutes to speak to the board, Doug,
All right. So do I open up my camera or it's
if you wish. You certainly can if you wish.
All right, I'm kind of nervous. Hope everything goes well. 1 second. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Hey, pray for me. Hopefully everything will go well.
So you can begin anytime, Doug. Mr. Eden.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. And my name is Dowd Aiden, and today I'm here to talk about a very important topic for our community. And that topic is diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion is absolutely necessary and a priority for our community because at the end of the day, we're all here in the best interest of our students. And when I talk about diversity and inclusion, I'm talking about diverse staff, leadership staff, visible minorities as principals, as vice principals, Indigenous members from the Indigenous community, Black community. A lot of our students need to see principals and vice principals that look like them. Principals and vice principals in our public school systems that can relate to their cultural awareness. As our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said, that we are stronger as a community, as a diverse community, not in spite of it. Also, our community, we are ready to work with all board members, chair, vice chair, director of education, in any capacity to see these changes implemented in our public school system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eden. And we do have a question of clarification for you from the chair of our board, Trustee Lynn Scott. So go ahead, Trustee Scott.
Thank you very much for presenting this evening. I think it's really important to have partners in the community who can help us move forward with improving equity and inclusion and making sure that diversity is represented in all areas of our district and valued. You speak about your community, and I wonder if you could clarify, are you part of a formal organization or an informal organization? Or when you speak of our community, what exactly are you referencing?
Yeah, great question. When I say community, I'm speaking specifically when it comes to like the Bayshore community. I was a resident in Stittsville before, but now I moved to Bayshore. So I'm specifically talking about the Bayshore community and the residents there.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Certainly Bayshore is and has been, as long as I can remember, a really diverse community. So it's good to know that we can rely on some support from you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. And moving on to Trustee Fisher.
Yeah, thanks, Keith, and thanks for the presentation, Dowd. You did a great job, very thoughtful. Great to have you back again. So please do come back. The question that I have for you is some of the work that I do outside the school board is with a lot of corporations around the world. I was reading a great study last week with Procter & Gamble. Their chairman has set a target of 50-50, where with their global workforce, 50% gender balance, and within that, a diversity target. When you look at the school board, do you feel it would be advantageous for us to consider setting some kind of a target where we're trying to meet that gender balance, that diversity balance, across all levels of the organization, so people know sort of what we're trying to strive for as an organization? Do you feel that those kind of targets are helpful in pushing this system and communicating to our community about where we are in with respect to the gender balance and diversity and inclusion in the school board?
Mr. Fisher, great question. I 100% agree with that. I think that's an absolutely fantastic start, and we can only grow from there, because at the end of the day, we need to start seeing these changes in our public school system, and for our students to actually see a principal and a vice principal that, like I said, reflects how they look like, or are culturally aware, and they can relate to them, and it can only aspire our students to do more and to be more. So when we're talking about establishing these targets, that's an excellent start, and we can only grow from there. And in addition to that, I know it doesn't relate to this, but on a federal level, the Privy Council mandated the government of Canada to implement diversity in the workforce. I think it was last year, about a couple of months ago. So that's on a federal level. So it kind of, I remember, it kind of reminds me of that. So if we can have some sort of target in the public school system, right? That's exactly what I'm talking about, and we can only grow together going forward.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And last question from Trustee Huff.
Good evening, and thank you again for your delegation. I had the privilege of speaking with your partner, Adam, today about this issue, and I'm so glad that you were able to make a delegation tonight. My question, I have a question and then a suggestion. My question is, if you had a wish list, if you could have 3 wishes, where would you have a start? How would you rank out the most important places that the conversation has led from your community to bring to us? Where should we start this process?
That's a great question, Wendy. In terms of a start, the only thing that can come into my mind, and of course we can have more conversations about this, and I would love to have meetings with you and with anyone of the board to talk about concrete steps. But automatically what comes into my mind is hiring process, hiring visible minorities and Indigenous communities and Blacks as principal, as vice principal, in leadership roles. This is where we can immediately start, from a hiring standpoint. That's the need. I spoke with a gentleman actually last week, and it was extremely sad. And he's a qualified principal, and he couldn't get a job. So what he did is he started he couldn't get a job in the public school system. And he really told me, I believe it's because of how I look like. And I said, wow, that speaks volumes, or the name that he has. And I know in the government, they had something called, and I spoke with Anita Vanderbilt, and we were talking about how, like, when it comes to the hiring process, the no-name hiring process, I think you know what I'm talking about. I've got it's called like no name. Yeah. So you apply with no name, so you don't get discriminated based on your name. So because he has a different name, right, or so he felt like he was discriminated against, and because how he looked like. So what he got, the good thing is that he was inspired, because now he opened his own Ontario private and online school. And now he's a principal, and he has a lot of students, and he's doing fantastic. But that's just one example of what we're talking about here. We're talking about real stuff. We're talking about, we need to immediately, as taxpayers, right? We're funding the public school system, and we need to see this reflected. This is a serious issue. This is happening to real people. And if this is not happening, and if we don't implement these changes, what are we doing? What are we doing as a board? right? Where is our taxpayers going? How is this reflected, in our public school systems? We're a diverse nation. We're a diverse country. And this needs to be reflected on our school board. And again, our community is willing to work with all of you in any capacity to get this done ASAP.
That's fantastic. I think two things. I want to just respond to that comment, because there are two ways to handle this sort of situation from an HR perspective. And one is to, in order to prevent cases of discrimination based on a name, you might do what they do in orchestras now, where they will do auditions behind curtains. So you cannot see the sex or race or whatever of the people who are auditioning for the orchestra positions. Or on the other hand, do we need to see the faces? Maybe we really need to see the faces more. Maybe we need to see the faces of the faces to see how they match the faces of the children in the classroom. So it's an HR conundrum, I think, that needs to be discussed, which is going to bring me to my last comment here. I mentioned on the phone earlier when I was speaking to Adam today that I would be very willing and eager to have a conversation with the members of people from your community, in our community, if we could pull together something. And I'm going to invite at this time all of my colleagues to join in on that conversation so that we can together hear what our community is asking from us, and so that we can have some guidance as we move this very important issue of belonging and equity and diversity in our schools along. So my friends, I hope you will join us when we have that conversation. I'll let you know when it's going to happen.
Thank you very much, Trustee Huff. And thank you very much, Mr. Aiden, for joining us this evening. And you're certainly welcome to look at the rest of the meeting on live stream and from our website. And so thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
And moving on in our agenda to briefing from the chair. Go ahead, Chair Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging the events that are currently taking place in Ukraine. We know this situation closely affects many in our community, and our thoughts are with all of those impacted at this time. We recognize and appreciate the fact that our OCDSB community includes families with backgrounds from all over the world, not only those with Ukrainian, Belarusian, or Russian heritage, but also many others with direct experience of the ravages of wars and conflicts in other countries. Last week, the district issued guidance to parents and staff on how to discuss the situation in Ukraine. Our goal is to approach these discussions with compassion and care, and we want to ensure that all students, families, and staff feel a sense of belonging and value in our OCDSB community. Now is not the time to stigmatize any members of our community. It is important for us to come together to ensure students, families, and staff all receive the support that they need. Secondly, today is International Women's Day, a global day that recognizes and celebrates the women and girls who inspire us. It's also a time to raise awareness of the progress made towards achieving gender equality and to acknowledge the work that remains to be done. At the OCDSB, there is much to celebrate. We're fortunate to have many inspiring women leaders teaching classes, serving as principals, managing departments, supporting families, and even sitting with us in this virtual room today. We also look forward to seeing many girls and women from among our students and staff who will be sources of information, sources of inspiration in the years to come. So happy International Women's Day to everyone. And finally, I would like to note that today the Ontario government announced it is introducing a new science and technology curriculum and de-streaming the grade 9 science course for the upcoming 2022-2023 school year. The revised curriculum includes required learning on real-world connections between science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The new expectations include an emphasis on coding, emerging technology, skilled trades, and food literacy. The new curriculum will be implemented in September 2022 at the start of the 2022-23 school year, and we will have more information about the content of that curriculum as it becomes available. And that concludes my briefing for this evening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And are there any questions for the chair on her briefing? And seeing none, moving to briefing from the director. Go ahead, Madam Director.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Last week, the Ontario Human Rights Commission released its report on its right to read public inquiry. This review started in October 2019, and it looked into the human rights issues that affect students with reading disabilities in Ontario's public education system. The OCDSB was one of the 8 sample English language school boards selected as a part of the inquiry. The final report highlights how learning to read is not a privilege, but a basic and essential human right. It includes 157 recommendations to the Ministry of Education, school boards, and faculties of education on how to address systemic issues that affect the right to learn to read. This is a significant study, and the OCDSB will be putting its recommendations into practice. Our work to improve literacy is ongoing. Over the past year, we have taken a number of measures to support students and educators. This includes training and professional development and new reading intervention programs for students. If parents have any questions or concerns regarding their child's reading skills, they are encouraged to contact their child's teacher or the principal of their school. The OCDSB is organizing a speech and language expectations for kindergarten workshop on March the 24th. This virtual information session is for kindergarten parents and caregivers and will help them to learn how to identify their child's speech and language developmental level. More details can be found on our website. Also this month, our Learning Support Services, also known as LSS team, will be hosting a transition planning workshop series. These virtual information sessions will provide detailed information to families and caregivers of students with developmental disabilities about how they can support their child as they transition to a life beyond high school. These workshops will cover important topics that include navigating the system, community day programs, post-secondary education opportunities, and employment opportunities support. Further information is also available on our website. And a reminder that next week is March break at the OCDSB. We hope that students, families, and staff can find some time to rest, recharge after a very busy and challenging winter. Thank you, and that's all for my report and my update to you, Chair. And with your indulgence, I'll pause for questions at this point, but we do have a brief COVID update to follow.
No problem. Thank you very much, Madam Director. And we're going to go to Trustee Bell.
Thank you very much, Director, for the update. Appreciate hearing that we will be incorporating the practices found in the right to read inquiry recommendations. I'm wondering, will we be publicly coming up with our OCDSB response to the right to read recommendations and clearly outlining where and how we will be incorporating those findings into practice. And I'll hold off on my second question until the COVID update. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Bell, and through you, Chair. Certainly the response to the right to read inquiry, again, 157 recommendations. I would say to you that our response in terms of delivery on the expectations will be staged because there are a number of pieces that will require varying degrees of collaboration. So for example, the conversations about what is screening and what is an assessment tool is is a decision that we will make in concert with not only our union partners, we will also make that in concert with the Ministry of Education. Their expectations around collaboration with the faculties, and so that will also require some collaboration. The pieces where we are able to undertake that on our own, certainly we're happy, always happy to bring forward updates to trustees on practices that we're undertaking in classrooms. And in fact, we had a presentation, a learning presentation for superintendents of instruction last week, Monday, about where it is that we sit with our own intervention programs, how it is that we are training and developing our staff, and what it is that we need to look for. So what we would be doing is bringing to you staged reports and updates. Happy to include those, as it is our students and their engagement is centered to our work. And as we continue to work with the ministry, we do know that the ministry also has plans around the expectation for delivery, because there are some implications for staffing and some such resourcing for those pieces. So this certainly will be ongoing. Not to say that we wouldn't start in September, but we certainly can say we won't finish in September because there is quite a long road ahead.
I guess a question in follow-up. I guess as a trustee, I would be very interested in understanding what are the policy implications, because you've said that there would be a lot of changes to practices, and what are the points where us as trustees would have to come together to make decisions regarding the policy choices that are referenced within the right to read recommendations. And then I think, in addition, it would, I think, a clear statement for the public on how we plan to implement that over starting in September, but over how long of a time period before we become compliant. And I understand that part of that will have to do with the province. But again, my question is, how will we publicly commit from a policy and a practice perspective to this report? And ensure that the public can hold us accountable to that. So I appreciate the reporting, but I think getting a sense of where we're at and where we need to be at from a policy perspective will be very important. And that also has budget implications. And I know that we will be discussing the budget very soon. So having a sense of what are the most urgent priorities that we must take into account before the budget process would be very much appreciated. And Director, I would appreciate your comment on the public nature of those commitments.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. It would be premature for me to be able to say to you on a time when a full analysis with the policy implications, the staffing implications, the resourcing implications, and the financial implications would come to the table. Because to be quite frank, we'll be guessing in the dark without some clear capacity and clear understanding around where the ministry direction will take us. We do understand that there's a curriculum component to this, and the curriculum component falls in the Ministry of Education's hands, not in the hands, while it's a policy item, it is a provincial policy item, it is not a board policy item. And so without that, it would be unfortunate if we prematurely made decisions around curriculum implementation without that piece from the ministry, only to have to redirect our resources and our approach. And so this is why I indicated that it would be staged, because there are a number of layers of policy pieces where there are implications. So I would say to you that certainly, given that we will be, and we're having public discussions around academic staffing right in this period of time, with an expectation for approval at the end of March, that the right to read piece is unlikely to inform that process. That process was actually under development before the right to read report was published, and it would be unwise to simply jump into analysis. That said, in anticipation of the fact that this was coming forward, we did consider that piece, and I'm seeing my internet is unstable, so I'm going to turn off my camera if you don't mind, that we need to be very cognizant of what is going to come out from the various partners before we make a commitment. So in truth, Trustee Bell, I am not inclined to say that we will have any kind of commitment report before the end of the school year. It's more likely that we would have a commitment report coming into the fall.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Trustee Fisher.
Thanks, Keith, and thank you for the update, Director, and really appreciate the comments from Justine about the importance of this report. I think it's fair to say that we've speculated and if not known about many of these issues for some time. They're not new for many of us in either at the school board level or as educators. I guess my real concern is that if we're still talking about this report and how to implement it in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years, we are really missing a significant opportunity to have a major impact on the lives of many students in our school board who continue to suffer because they can't read and they can't get the foundation for everything else in their learning journey. And so I get the complexities in terms of this element is school board related, this element has to be with the ministry, this department might own this perspective. At the end of the day, we have to be ambitious. We have to take hold of these recommendations, and someone's going to have to drive these forward. Otherwise, as we've seen in the past, they're just going to fall through the cracks, and the students are going to fall through the cracks, and they're just going to move through a moment of time and not get the supports that they need. And I think that will be a major failing on us as a school board, on the province as public education. So I think just to reinforce Justine's point, I would love to see some kind of a roadmap in terms of how we are responding to the recommendations that are clearly in our domain, and how that is going to tactically inform the things that we do, on real timelines with real investments. And I'd like to see some kind of, a reflection in this roadmap about how we as a school board are going to actively engage with the ministry on the parts that they own. So we're looking at, trying to solve this problem in a complete way. If we say we're just going to stage this and we're going to try and deal with it here, and we're going to leave the ministry to do this, we're going to be talking about this for the next 10 years. We've already been talking about it for 10 years. So I would fully endorse some kind of a public-facing document that really lays out for parents and for our students how we're going to deal with these very real recommendations. Otherwise, I don't think they're going to get addressed in a satisfactory way at all.
Thank you very much. And moving on, I believe Trustee Campbell did have his hand up before everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've waffled whether I really have anything of substance to ask after the extended and very rich interchange with Trustee Bell, and I thank her and staff. I really gained a lot by that. I think just a comment. I guess I really take the director's suggestions here to heart. I would like to see at the end of the day, maybe it's accumulated information over time, a scorecard, effectively, how we've addressed the where it's within our jurisdiction, how we've addressed things, how we've understood things, and that maybe need to be accumulated to over time. And I'm just looking at some of the recommendations here, and some of the language needs to be explored, right? In one case, they talk about marginalized students having equal access. Well, equal access? I mean, like, what do they mean here, and what's the context? Sufficient training. Well, what's sufficiency? So a lot of the stuff really, I think, has to be teased out. And so I take that, but having some kind of maybe a roadmap in the medium term, in terms of how we'll seek to address these things, clarify these things would be useful. But I don't expect magic. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And going to Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you too to Director Williams-Taylor for her comments and her presentation of the right to read. As a union member and a teacher of more than 40 years, I have a great deal of difficulty with the Human Rights Commission's report, not because of the veracity of it, with that I agree, but they have put yet one more onus on the education system with no funding. We do not have the funds to enact this practice. Should we have the funds? Yes. So my question is really to you as trustees. What are you doing to lobby the ministry to get money to do this? We owe it to our children. We owe it to our future. We owe it to our society. And to date, I have seen nothing that tells me that those who are directed to put all of these various policies into place do anything to get the funds we need. Back in the days of Mike Harris, our funding changed. And with that funding change, we diminished the education system and we diminished the education that we provide to our children. We don't have the money or the resources to put this plan in place. How is that going to be done? That is my question to you, trustees. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. And
You're on mute, Keith.
sorry, going on to Trustee Lara.
Well, I don't have an answer for Ms. Dixon, but I do have a follow-up to Mark's comments. I think that there is going to be some footballing from any provincial government about whose responsibility any individual piece of this report is going to be. And I think we should take it upon ourselves to say anything that is debatably within our jurisdiction, we should try and implement or try and undertake. And if the province comes back later and says, well, we should have done it, well, that's fine. But I really do think we should take it upon ourselves to try and implement as much of this as we can. And anything that is debatably within our jurisdiction, we should try and implement.
Thank you very much, Trustee Lara. And moving on to Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that it's reasonable to be looking at a staged approach here because there are things that can be done now. In fact, my understanding from listening to the discussion at the last meeting of our Special Education Advisory Committee is that there are things that are already happening in this regard, which will support implementing a number of the recommendations in the from the right to read inquiry. Some of the things will indeed take additional resources, and I expect to see some of those things coming forward when we have our staff recommended budget. But at the same time, there are other things that can be done with the existing resources. And when we look at changing teaching strategies, we can make use of our professional development days. We can make use of our instructional coaches and our LSS supports to help to make that change happen. We have some really fabulous teachers and administrators and EAs in the system and ECEs. And I'm quite sure that those who are reading the report and its recommendations now are looking and considering how those things will in fact change practice in the classroom. When I was just a little girl, my mother always said, if you can read, you can do anything. And I think that's probably still very true today. The important thing is if we want our kids to be able to do anything, we really, really need to make sure they can read. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Seeing no further questions, going back to the director for the COVID update.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I would like to turn that over to Associate Director Reynolds. AD Reynolds, please.
Great, thank you, and through you, Chair. Although, as we have seen, there is reason to be optimistic that a possible end of the pandemic is in sight, and certainly the removal of many of the COVID restrictions in public spaces might be seen as encouraging, the education sector continues to take a cautious approach. We are still experiencing increased rates of staff and student absences due to illness, and keeping schools open and students attending in person remains the priority. We are always working closely with OPH, and we continue to provide vaccination clinics to our students and communities. And as you know, the guidelines for the Ministry of Education for schools remain in place and continue to impose enhanced safety measures in schools, such as staff and student masking, daily verification of self-screening, maintaining of cohorts at recess and at lunch breaks, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, the OCDSB is continuing to work with OPH to safely remove some of the measures that have been in place over the past several months and years, and we're doing so in alignment with the current ministry guidance. We're increasing field trip opportunities. More extracurricular activities are being brought back online. We're hoping to have more in-person school leaving and graduation celebrations this spring. And we're also increasing the number of school spaces available for community use of school permits after school in the evenings and on the weekends. And we hope to see further expansion of opportunities for students following a successful return after March break, something that has not happened in 3 years. As new guidance and direction is received from the ministry, we will continue to work with our partners towards its safe implementation for our staff and students. That's the end of the presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And are there any questions on the COVID update? Trustee Bell?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. It's good to hear that there is no immediate concern regarding the removal of masks in the school setting. My question is, should we learn that masking would not be required? Would we be in a position to provide those masks that have been provided to educators, N95s and such, to them for the end of the year? I guess my question is twofold. Do we have enough in stock for the rest of the year to provide to teachers and educators and staff? And if we do not, would we be able as a board to determine that that is something, in fact, that we would have the resources to fund? Through you, Chair, this might better be a question to CFO Carson.
Anyone? Madam Director?
Just before the CFO comments, I see his cameras come on. You know, as noted, the board motion for masking would remain in place regardless of any changes from ministry direction. So that direction change would have to come from the Board of Trustees. I do believe we have fairly sufficient stocks of masks, but I see CFO Carson is available to comment further.
Thank you, Chair. We do, as Mr. Reynolds said, we would continue to follow the existing board motion. We have a very large supply of N95 masks. As you know, not everyone took advantage of those masks, and we have received a couple of orders of those couple of deliveries beyond what we had ordered. So we probably are close to having enough to take us to the end of the year. Hard to say for sure. We haven't done a full inventory. In terms of the medical masks, we have a smaller, that would be a different issue for staff, but we would be looking at, again, it's a significantly lower cost if those were needed to be acquired. I think we had provided that information on the daily cost on the worst, looking at a worst case previously. As to where those dollars would come from, there isn't necessarily a specific funding source, but if it is an expense we hadn't budgeted for. So all other things being equal, it would either increase a deficit or decrease a surplus. But I want to reiterate what the Associate Director said. we've had no indication from the province that they will be discontinuing the distribution of the supplies they have available.
All right, thank you very much. And Ms. Gardner, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to reiterate what Trustee Bell asked, and thank the OCDSB for taking care of their employees and students alike. I know you've heard many voices tonight, but I just want to make it clear that most of our members really do. I am the president of the Elementary Teachers Federation and in Ottawa-Carleton, and most of our members do really appreciate any health and safety precautions that you can take in terms of PPE, and masking is extremely important to them. We've advocated very hard for N95s, and so it's very nice to hear that they will continue to be provided, and that the medical mask will also be an option. So I just wanted to thank the trustees and thank the school board, because it is really important. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. And seeing no further questions for the COVID-19 update, thank you very much. So moving on in our agenda to item matters for action, item 7.1, reports 22-006, consultation plan for new policy P144.SCO student exclusions. So Madam Director, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. We do have quite a robust package pertaining to this consultation plan that has been presented for the Board of Trustees consideration. Superintendent Mary Jane Farish is the lead on this item. So I will turn it to Superintendent Farish to take us through and to address questions at this point.
Thank you very much, Director Williams-Taylor, and through you, Chair, I will just share my screen. I have a few slides that I would just like to use to introduce the draft consultation plan this evening. I'd like to also begin with an acknowledgement of the collaborative leadership for this draft policy and the plan from Learning Support Services. Safe Schools System Principal Anderson has worked with the past mental health lead, Dr. Petra Duschner, and is currently working with our current mental health lead, Emily Bala, and the Supervisor of Psychological Services, Dr. Kristen Shaw. To situate this consultation plan this evening, I would like to draw attention and provide a bit of a reminder of some of the feedback that we received during our Safe Schools Policies consultation activities. This has brought us to the place where we are tonight, and as you will see, we learned from the feedback and we implemented the feedback in the ways of creating policies that are more inclusive, embodying of human rights, better aligned with other policies and procedures. This is within the Safe Schools arena of policies. We also have consolidated many of our policies. And as you know, we are working quickly and readily on revising some of the procedures as well. And lastly, during the consultation and engagement activities for the Safe Schools policies, we heard from stakeholders, including trustees, that a policy clarifying the practice of employing student exclusion was indeed required. The LOT, or the letter of transmission, will provide more detail in the areas of context and key considerations. I wanted to highlight a few points with you this evening. The use of exclusion is a response to the presenting student safety concern, where mitigating factors and circumstances guide the principal's determination that progressive discipline is not appropriate. Cases where mitigating circumstances and factors guide us away from progressive discipline and where student safety is at risk, often students do not have the capacity to understand the risks of their behavior, nor make different choices independently and without direct interventions. The use of student exclusion is temporary and involves planning for a safe and supported reentry for the student. This planning is done in consultation with the student's parent or guardian, and also in consultation with parties from the school and district and from the student's team of caregivers. In conducting consultation on what a policy should include and reflect, we have proposed a plan that elevates the voices of parents and guardians. The plan offers opportunities for stakeholders who expressed interest through our previous Safe Schools consultation. And we also want to prioritize stakeholder voices with experiences of working through student exclusions as family members and staff. Due to the nature of exclusions, students who have special education exceptionalities, whether formally identified or not, experience exclusions more frequently, as it is sometimes a more appropriate response than issuing progressive discipline. Therefore, interested trustees, members of the Special Education Advisory Committee, the Advisory Committee for Equity, and Indigenous Education Council members will be invited to a focus discussion session to address the draft policy. You will also see in this consultation plan the opportunities for general public and all parents and guardians of the district, as well as staff, to share their feedback and input. And just as a reminder, this timeline provides a review of how this consultation fits into the path that we are traveling within the Safe Schools area for the support and promotion of safety. The work that got us here comes and takes us to the middle of the screen, where you'll see the draft consultation plan for student exclusion policy. And that's where we are this evening. And the path going forward shows us the next steps. And so it is our recommendation to the Board of Trustees that the board approve the consultation plan for the new policy E144.SCO student exclusions. And now, of course, time for questions and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Farish. And before we get started, I would like to quickly address something, and that is just to be clear that we are debating this evening the consultation plan, not the policy itself. And there is a distinct difference, and we've had trouble in the past distinguishing between the two. So if we could confine our comments to that, it would be very much appreciated. And with that, we'll get started with Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to move the recommendation, and I won't require any introduction because you stole my introduction, your previous comments. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blackburn. And moving on to Trustee Campbell.
Thank you, and thank you to Trustee Blackburn for moving. I guess one question of what will be consulted upon. I know that in the letter of transmittal and I think elsewhere, maybe in one of our policies, were included a definition. I can't remember now, but we updated things to reflect the ministry definition, which includes exclusion from a classroom. So is it the staff intent to consult on that aspect of inclusion, as well as I guess the more normal thing that people think of, which is exclusion from a school? Will there be a focus in the policy and in the consultation on exclusion from a classroom as well, or not so much?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Trustee Campbell. I think you might be speaking about a practice which is really more of an intervention or a strategy that we use sometimes in schools to support students with changing their day or modifying their day. So that won't be contemplated in this policy. This policy is specific to a safety concern and the response to the safety concern in which we are taking into consideration mitigating factors, and a progressive discipline response is not appropriate. So you may be speaking more about the strategies or interventions that are used to support students as part of an IEP or different type of plan for their success in their program with their goals.
I appreciate that, but I'm referring, I guess, to the definition. This is maybe it's good that I asked this then, because I'm referring really, I guess, to Section 6. It refers to the Education Act, quotes the Education Act, right? It's the may refuse to admit to a school or classroom a person, it's fairly clear that the definition of exclusion is not necessarily exclusion from a school, but also exclusion from a classroom, obviously for safety reasons, I imagine. But I guess just then, and this, so that there's two parts, it appears, to the Education Act understanding and definition of exclusion, right? It's not just school exclusions, it's classroom exclusions. But is this policy that you mean to consult upon focused only on school exclusions then? Is that what I should understand?
Through you, Chair, anytime we're using an exclusion as a response to student safety, this policy would speak to that. So the policy will include the circumstance where safety may be restricted to a certain classroom. But that's, again, conversation that will be happening during the consultation, and we'll get.
Thank you. No, that's good. That's fine. I just wanted to understand what we would be consulting upon. So this is not a sort of a necessarily one-sided, as it were, consultation, but that may be the main thrust. Okay, I just want to understand what the directionality of this would be. I guess in terms of the, I like the plan. I really appreciate the background and the appeal provision and everything else is noted. I do wonder, because of some of our recent experience, I'm going to the table in Section 9, page 3 and 4 of the report. We're looking at the meetings that were being proposed, and there are certain dates proposed. Obviously, they might move around a bit, but so we're looking at one CAL committee meeting, and then 2 weeks later, one board meeting. And I guess in terms of some of our recent experience, I guess I'm a little bit uncertain as to, I guess a lot will depend upon the March to May consultation activities, which may have yet to be fully defined. But I guess I'd like to express my concern that, if that was what was being proposed, one meeting of a lot of different individuals not really permitting dialogue and maybe stepping through the rationale of clauses and text provenance and that kind of thing may not save us from having extended discussion going beyond one cow. And I guess I'd like a staff comment.
Chair, I agree with you. It is ambitious, Trustee Campbell. That wasn't intended to limit conversation in any way. It was really to try to expedite the work that we have heard since the beginning of our consultation in 2019, that this is something that families want clear direction around parameters and the practices that we are employing. It's certainly not a new practice. So I think that is the intent of this timeline, is to coincide with the learning that we have benefited from with our Safe Schools consultations thus far, and use that momentum to keep us going, to get to the place where we can have even a procedure started to be developed as early as the summer. But again, I can't presuppose the ways that the engagement may take us longer or show different ways of us having to consider what we're hearing. And so the timeline certainly is also draft.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I guess I'm concerned leaving things until June when there's no more wiggle room left in the year, given some of our recent experience. Okay, thank you.
Very much. And we're going to Trustee Ellis.
Thank you. Looking at Appendix A, the early April 2022 talks about focused discussion sessions with trustees, members, special education, the advisory committee on equity, and the Indigenous Education Council. So is the intent not to have the draft policy go to the whole committees of Special Education Advisory Council or committee, the Advisory Council on Equity and the Indigenous Council?
Through you, Chair. Trustee Ellis, I think a copy of the draft policy certainly would be shared with each of the advisory committees, but that particular opportunity, we wanted to really target and focus it. And I know that often we have taken time from committee agendas during the regularly scheduled meetings. So we wanted to offer this as a distinct opportunity for that feedback, and members from each of those committees that may have a bring a voice of experience and also certain perspective and insight to the conversation.
So is this one big focus group with the 3 committee members who wish to and trustees? It'll all be there one meeting? Is that what you're anticipating? I guess if you could flesh out what these focus groups will look like, that would be helpful.
Sure. Through you, Chair. Yes, that is the intention. It is to have one larger focus group session with the ability for members from the different advisory groups to hear each other's perspectives as well in the discussion and to contribute in that way.
Okay, thank you. I'm disappointed. I prefer a little more time, and I'm not saying don't do the focus group. I think it should go to some of these committees. Couple down, the 20th April to 12 May row. It goes back to policy analysts to revise the proposed draft policy, I guess, from the feedback. The next one is consultations with the working group to review the final draft of the policy. So I'm assuming that's the draft after it's been revised, but I'm not sure who the working group is. Could you explain how the working group's constituted and what other engagement the working group has throughout this process?
Through you, Chair. Maybe the use of working group sounds more formal than it was intended to be. So I believe it's in section number 5 at the top of the page. And so it's at the top of the page that's just above section 6. Pardon me, it's not very clear. There is a paragraph that talks about a number of individuals who have been working internally to try to guide and support the practice, guide and support our current practice, and then contribute to formalizing that in a policy. So that internal working group is comprised of central staff from Learning Support Services, policy analysts, Safe Schools system principal, and representatives from principals and vice principals in the elementary and secondary panels. And so it would be that the feedback that we have from the consultation is being reviewed and it's being considered. And does this draft really represent the voices and prioritizing those voices of stakeholders who have direct experience with the practice of consultation? the people who are in that internal group are also experienced in supporting families and working through ways to make plans for students to be re-engaged following an exclusion.
Had you, it's been proposed from time to time or recently that ad hoc committee that included trustees might be helpful. Did you consider that when you put this process in place?
I see that Executive Officer Giroux might be able to help me with that answer. Thank you.
That's something that we've definitely considered as part of our work on the policy review process, and will be a discussion that we're bringing forward to board, but it's not something that we pulled out of that broader review process to apply to this particular policy development.
I guess over the years, I've probably dealt with 10 to 15 exclusions. There's whole sections in this draft policy missing, in my opinion. So I guess I'll be in touch. I find this rather an awkward way. You know, I know there have been other trustees have worked with exclusions as well. And there's an expertise around there in us knowing, because we generally trustees deal with the parents in a somewhat more candid manner than might happen under these stressful exclusion situations. But we're not taking advantage of trustee knowledge in this. You know, in all of our policy discussion, I'll say this generally, this one's bugging me personally, but generally, we are the last where we should be at least have our input of what we're looking for in a policy, instead of being out of that whole process until the end. And that's why we have a lot of amendments that are necessary. Anyways, well, thank you. I'll be, yeah, let me think about this. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis. And we're going to go to the ACE rep. I'm sorry,
It's okay, Keith. It's Deepika.
Deepika, sorry about that.
That's okay, no worries. I am curious. I'm actually curious whether there was any consideration of bringing the consultation plan to ACE and IAC for some feedback. The consultation plan itself, especially given the disproportionalities around suspensions and that report that we saw earlier, I guess, mid 2021. And I'm also, so that's my first question. And my second question to you would be, when you do the consultations, how are you planning to situate the research that's already been conducted on this issue, so that the conversations with stakeholders can take place in a context where they are aware of the research to date, the evidence of the district itself? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much, Deepika, for your questions. I'm wondering if when you talk about the research, if maybe you could just clarify, are you talking about suspensions and expulsions and progressive discipline, the disproportionality? Is that what you're referring to as the research?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you. So for this particular policy, student exclusion, it actually is, although it's a response to safety, a safety concern, and in this case, it's a student safety concern, it's not a progressive discipline response. So it would not be seen as something that would be a consequence in the way that progressive discipline that is. So for instance, a suspension is a consequence. Other types of approaches to progressive discipline would also be recorded as response to an incident, and we're working through to correct the behavior, but also to provide more of a supportive and educative response. For exclusions, student exclusions, we've considered the fact that the student is not in a position where the behaviors that have been exhibited are ones that the student has the ability to monitor or change or to make different choices about. And it's often connected to an exceptionality or an identification from special education. So it would not be part of the research around suspensions and expulsions because it's separate and apart. It would be a temporary measure with an undefined time frame because we're working to try to create a plan for re-entry with as quickly as we can with the most important information and the voices around the table. So it's not a defined period of time where it's seen as a consequence. It's more an immediate intervention so that we can plan to, with the families treating sometimes people that are helping to support the family, sometimes from a medical perspective, and certainly other caregivers and advocates as well. We consult to try to find a way to have the student back in a safe way and what interventions and strategies we can change or modify on our part. So I'm not sure that we have the research on that particular practice, but we definitely want to hear the voice from families and caregivers who may also attend SEAC or ACE or the Indigenous Education Council because they may have intersections with this practice happening. And so that's why we're really prioritizing those groups in this case. And as Trustee Ellis said, trustees also have a lot of experience in supporting families and working with schools to understand and work through the steps to ensure that the dignity of students are prioritized and that we're making good decisions around how to make sure safety is prioritized and that support is there in place for the students. So your question about consultation on the consultation plan, we didn't in this case consider that. We did a lot of consultation around safe schools. And in fact, we did consult on the consultation plan for the safe schools consultation plan. So we are trying to use the momentum that was started and really respect the voices that we heard from that. And then just now really target and try to go further with this based on the track that we've already set.
Thank you for those answers. And just to follow up, are you sure that you have no data on, I really appreciate that distinction. It wasn't clear to me. But now with the distinction, are you sure you have no data on student exclusions?
Through you, Chair. So the data will be recorded within the student information system that we use, because when there's an absence for a student, we'll have that recorded that way. We just haven't been engaged in any research around the practice of exclusion, but certainly that will be part of what we will be looking for and hoping to learn from as well in the use of employing this practice.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving to Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks very much for bringing this consultation plan forward. I really like the idea of trying to focus this consultation to involve people who have some direct information and experience to share with the team working on drafting the policy. Exclusions are not all that frequent. Certainly not in my experience. They are not a disciplinary measure, and they often are relatively short-lived. in terms of how long it takes to put together a system which will ensure a student's safety. And that could be something as in terms of just working through how we're going to get the student to school. If they're a child who cannot tolerate the usual means of transportation, if they are a child who has particular needs within the context of the school environment. Again, these are not always easily resolved, and sometimes the safety of a student can be at risk. So we really, really need to have some expert voices and some experienced voices coming into this. Because the circumstances for each situation are different. So I think the idea of the focus group that with representatives of the advisory committees and trustees who are interested and have potential contributions, I think that's a really good way to do it, because it concentrates the discussion and lets us learn from each other, and that I hope will help to inform the drafting of the policy. One particular concern, of course, will be sorting out the appeal process, because so far, although we've had to deal with a few appeals of exclusions, for the most part, we have not had a process and have had to rely on the processes that we have for dealing with appeals of student disciplinary actions. And so I hope that in the consultation, we will be able to hear more good thinking around how best to manage these things. And I will be happy to support the consultation plan as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Trustee Lyra.
Yeah, so I guess my first question is, how was the decision made to not check OCASC in either bullets 5 or bullet 6 in the appendix?
Through you, Chair, and I see Director Williams-Taylor may want to make a comment as well. Trustee Lyra, we're focusing on the committees that we felt had more direct experience and expertise to share. So there will be opportunities for all parents and guardians, school council members, general public to share feedback as well, but they aren't being prioritized in this particular plan or a focused conversation.
The reason I asked is that you have checked school councils. And to me, it seems like if you're going to check school councils, it makes sense to also check OCASC. Under who will be consulted, bullet 4.
Thank you through you, Chair. Thank you, Trustee Lyra. I was looking at section number 6 where we haven't checked school councils. So my apologies for that. So I think that it's more of the fact that they will be included in the messaging. We have an actual newsletter that goes directly to school council chairs, and through principals and vice principals at their schools, they would be sharing that a policy is being consulted upon. And so it would be an opportunity for council to be able to offer their guidance. But certainly it is not intended that school council chairs would be part of that focused, targeted session together.
Okay. So my reading of this has who would be consulted, school councils, and then separately we have a how will we make people aware. And so it makes sense to me to either uncheck school councils in the first one or check OCASC in the first one.
Through you, Chair. Good suggestion.
Okay. Then I will move that we uncheck school councils from who will be consulted.
I don't know if that requires a motion, trustee Lyra.
I mean, I think it does because we're approving a report that I'd like to change a piece of. If it's friendly and nobody wants to argue about it, then I don't think it requires a motion, but.
Okay, we'll treat it as a change, an amendment then. So you're moving that we uncheck school councils?
Yeah.
Okay, and
From the box labeled number 4 on the second page.
box number 4 on the second page. Very good. And so if this is not friendly, please speak out or raise your hand. And it appears it's friendly, so the box is unchecked.
That was all. Thanks.
Thank you. And so we're going to then move on to Ms. Gardner. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I don't think I can put my video on at the moment because the host has stopped that, but that's okay. You don't need to see me right now. It's I would just like to, first of all, thank Superintendent Mary Jane Farish. I know a lot of work has gone into this, and I just, wanted to also reiterate that, yes, the federations have been consulted and we have given our feedback. I think some of the information that, might be confusing to some people is maybe the definition of the word progressive. So I think that's an important piece that some of us needed to kind of tackle, because we're used to progressive being, moving up along an echelon. And I think part of what we're looking at is also being progressive in terms of moving forward in such a way that is, helpful, and also, really looking at being equitable as well. So it is a very, it's not an easy task, but certainly we do have, some concerns in terms of what that might look like at a school level. So one of the things that we have asked is that that teachers actually, that there be perhaps maybe a town hall given for educators to be able to, who are really the grassroots, who are working on the ground level, to talk about what that actually looks like in practice with regards to the policy itself. So I just wanted to mention that and say that, we really, value the voices of everyone, and that educators themselves who will have to implement a lot of this have, we have certainly spoken on their behalf, but we really look forward to some time where educators themselves who are doing the work will actually have a voice as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gardner. Moving on to Tom Holloway.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just wanted to clarify a point. So it looks like councils will be removed from consultation. Is that correct? On what was voted on?
That is correct, Mr. Holloway.
Okay. I guess I just wanted to reiterate our position that in the event councils are looked to, or even different folks within those different constituent communities, we do have the base of councils that we can reach out to work within those affected communities, even if it's not the councils themselves that are being consulted. And so we'd love to continue to be part of that advisory role if that's available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holloway. Moving on to Pat Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. As a previous speaker said, we are very appreciative as the Elementary Occasional Teachers Union representative for the direction that is going on in this policy. However, I am also somewhat concerned about consistency. It has been a problem in the past, and without concrete and objective guidelines, it means that we are still going to be experiencing inconsistencies in the implementation of this new policy. So one of my big concerns is that all staff in schools be made aware of it, be made aware of what the expectations are and what the steps are in progressive discipline. It is not just a blanket ideology. It does have a progressive component to it. And I think we need to ensure that that is provided to our staff and all of the parents as well, so that they know what to expect when their child has had a difficulty in school and how to make that a better situation for the children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I see that Trustee Campbell still has his hand up. Did you want to have a second go around, Trustee Campbell?
If I could briefly, thank you very much. Yeah.
Not a problem. Go ahead.
Very much appreciate the discussion. I guess going back perhaps to something as Grover raised as an idea to send the consultation plan through committees. I don't know if we would do this necessarily for every plan, but I think there are certain policies which much more cut and dried. Some will attract much more lightning and go to questions of disproportionality and all kinds of other things. I think this is probably one of them. So in such cases, perhaps going forward, maybe it's something we could consider doing. I notice in section 5, it asks if stakeholders have been involved in an informal consultation as part of the development of the plan. And the reply is that feedback from stakeholders in the Safe Schools policy discussions were considered prior to drafting this policy, not the plan. And so from the sounds of it, stakeholders were not actually directly engaged informally in terms of the development of the plan. So it's a bit disconcerting, I guess, for me. I guess I'll just note that. My diagnosis of some of our recent policy marathons, and if we have time, we'll continue it this evening, is that what we've done, and I see the consultation model reflected here, and I think it's certain policies, not all, but those will attract debate very naturally, predictably. The model is, we consult, we gather a whole bunch of ideas, then staff go away, expert staff go away and winnow through those ideas, decide what staff believe makes sense, what staff believe it would be an undue burden to commit to, what wouldn't, what would be advisable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then a draft comes forward. Or finalized or near penultimate draft comes forward for very quick approval, supposedly at COW. And I think that model is broken because I think that people very naturally will ask, well, wait a sec, I suggested this. Why isn't my suggestion incorporated? Or that's not the way I would have stated it. Or, well, why wasn't this considered? And so I really do think that there are some presumptions and assumptions here which need to be questioned. And I worry that we're simply setting ourselves up to replicate some of our recent difficulties here yet again. And I don't know what to do. I think this merits a broader discussion with colleagues and staff in terms of how we approach these things. We'll see. Thank you. That's it, really.
Thank you, Trustee Campbell. And I do see that Michelle Giroux, Executive Officer Giroux, did you want to respond to that?
I think that there's a lot of conversation about the policy review process, and I think the board has noted the need for a policy review process. And we've got an upcoming, we have had a couple of reports to you on that, and an upcoming discussion scheduled with you on that. What we have been trying to do as we work through the policies this year is to learn from our experience as we go through and to try and modify the process in a way that makes sense. In this particular case, as the superintendent noted at the outset, we tried to tailor the consultation to those groups who have the most direct impact. The question that was raised tonight was, should the consultation plan go to the advisory committees for comment before it comes here? And I think Superintendent Farish touched on this about trying to strike a balance with the advisory committees about not overloading their agenda, but also respecting the fact that the advisory committees are represented at this table and do have an opportunity to have input on the consultation plan through that process. And I guess finally, the last thing I would say, well, two things. One is all of this feedback is helpful in continuing to inform our process. In this particular policy, I'm not sure of the most recent data, and I don't know if Superintendent Farish has it, but the number of exclusions per year is fewer than 50 and possibly fewer than 25. I could be wrong about that, but if I look back at the data in 2018, I think the numbers were sitting around fewer than 25. So would be interesting for us to look at that, but I think we need to look at that and contextualize that. It's not that it's not a hugely important issue, but we need to think about how we spend our time. And so we'll take all of this feedback back to our policy review process as we continue to try and refine it. And I think what you have presently on your agenda is the question about approving the consultation plan for this particular policy. And that will allow us to at least move forward and engage in some discussions. And before this comes back, we will have had some of those additional policy discussions that might help us to refine the process as we move through. So hopefully that helps to address some of the concerns.
Ms. Gardner, your hand is still up. Did you have additional comments?
No, I did not. Thanks very much. Sorry about that.
No problem. And seeing no further speakers to this amended motion, I'm going to go back to Trustee Blackburn, the mover, for any wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry, I don't see myself there. Wow. I personally found that very frustrating and kind of a deja vu, and I wish maybe I had given my introduction, even though it would have been the same comments that Chair Penny had indicated, but I find it just, I can't come up with the word, but I've said this often, only at the OCDSB do we want to consult on who we're going to consult on a consultation plan. And people may think that something's broken, but something is definitely broken, and it's the amount of time it takes us to pass a consultation plan. And we as a district, as a board, as a committee, we have to make some tough choices. And if we continue on this path, we would basically have to meet every night for 6 hours a night to get half of our policies passed. But again, we were supposed to be talking about a consultation plan. So with that, I hope we pass the consultation plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blackburn. And with that, I'd like to call a question on it. And since this is a substantial item, if you could indicate your vote. So all those in favor of the consultation plan?
Bell in favor.
Boothby in favor.
Fisher in favor.
Lyra in favor.
Blackburn in favor.
Jennings in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Phyllis in favor.
Huff in favor.
Scott in favor.
Any in favor? And opposed? Abstaining?
Campbell abstains.
And that passes. Thank you very much. So moving on to reports from statutory and other committees. 8.1 Indigenous Education Council of the 20th of January 2022. I'd like to call for a mover to receive the report. Trustee Huff, thank you very much. Are there any errors and or omissions to the report? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on receipt of that report. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you very much. And moving on to, that passes. Moving on to the Advisory Committee on Equity report of January the 27th, 2022. I'd like to call for a mover to receive that report. Trustee Boothby, thank you very much. And are there any errors and or omissions to that report? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on the receipt of that report. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you, and that passes. Moving on to Special Education Advisory Committee of February the 2nd, 2022. I'd like to call for a mover to receive the report. Trustee Boothby, thank you very much. Are there any errors and or omissions? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on receipt. All those in favor? And opposed? And that passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to the Audit Committee of February the 16th, 2022. I'd like to call for a mover to receive the report. Trustee Lyra, thank you. Any errors or omissions in that report? And seeing none, I'd like to call a question on that. All those in favor? And opposed? And that passes. Thank you very much. So moving on to information items, item 9.1, report from OSPA. Trustee Boothby.
Thank you, Chair. Given the hour, I will just say the report is in your package here. And the only thing that I would point out is the transitioning from COVID school experience, the discussion paper, and there is a link to that in the report. Is a very interesting report. So I would urge trustees to have a look at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And are there any questions for Trustee Boothby? Seeing none, new ministry initiatives, Madam Director.
Thank you, through you, Chair. None at this time.
Thank you very much. And Trustee Blackburn, any update from OSTA?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And new business information and inquiries. Is there any new business this evening? Trustee Blackburn, you had your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I would like to inform the committee that I will be tabling a motion to reinstate the school resource officer program or something there like it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blackburn. Trustee Blackburn, you know the procedure that we'll have to schedule that and stuff like that. So you'll work with the administration to move that forward, right? So, okay, thank you.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no further new business, I'd like to declare the meeting adjourned. And I do note that we have a continuation meeting coming up. If I could suggest that we have a 5-minute break to allow us to rejuvenate a little bit, that would be probably in order. So we'll see everyone back here on the same, I guess it's the same link at 9:15. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. If trustees could just maybe turn on the cameras quickly. I know it's a pain, but just to make sure that we have quorum. Want to respect and maintain all of our bylaws. Okay. Indeed, we have quorum. So let's get started again. Thank you very much. And I'd like to call the March 8th Committee of the Whole continuation meeting to order, and note this meeting is to continue the debate on the Safe Schools policy. I'd like to note the meeting is taking place on unceded Algonquin territories, and I would like to thank the Algonquin nations for hosting this meeting on their land. And at the time of our adjournment on March the 1st, we were considering a motion to approve the safe school policies as provided in report 22-017. And the amendment to policy P.032 SCO, managing student behavior, moved by trustee Lyra. It was on the floor. And that was on, I think, page 14 of the table provided by manager Guptill. And I will, at the time of the adjournment, I did have a speakers list, which I had maintained. And so on my speakers list, I do have the PIC representative, the ACE representative, and trustee Campbell. And so we will continue on with that. And if there's additional people wish to comment on the amendment that is shown on the screen, we'll take those in order after these speakers. And so who do we have with us this evening from the Parent Involvement Committee? And I don't see anyone speaking up. And so unfortunately, we're going to have to go to the member from the ACE committee in substitution for Ms. Lamba. If you have a comment on this policy or would like to speak on it. And I think that's Deepika. Is she here?
Deepika, yes. Is it this particular policy?
It is. It's this particular policy that it's the part that's highlighted in blue, and that's an amendment as proposed by trustee Lara that we are debating. And I think that's your, Ms. Lamba had a comment or something to say about it, but it's okay if you do not.
I do not at this point, but if I do in a few moments, I will raise my hand.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
And so then we're going to move on to trustee Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whoops, I forget, to be honest, exactly where we're at with this, but I was wondering if we could have a staff comment.
Certainly. Is there a staff comment, Madam Director, on the particular amendment proposal?
Tonight, I'm going to ask Superintendent Farish to undertake that. And we had agreed with this particular policy that I would be deferring director comments to Associate Director Reynolds on this particular item because of his experience with this work. So I'll turn to Superintendent Farish at this point.
Thank you, Director Williams-Taylor, and through you, Chair. Chair, I believe that, and Trustee Campbell, I believe that when we left the conversation, we were clarifying for Board of Trustees and members here viewing this evening or the last time we met, that in fact students being interviewed by police in schools is not a common occurrence, and certainly we are directed through the provincial model or the provincial template for protocols for schools to use when engaging with police, that this would not be taking place on school property. So it is really, the direction is to avoid this situation. And then when there is a situation where it can't be avoided, it would be with the notification of a student's parent or guardian, and that the opportunity for the student to have the parent or guardian or an adult of their choice attend if there needed to be a meeting with the police. And then if an adult of the student's choice wasn't available, then the principal is actually designated within the provincial template to sit in for the purpose of being there and able to make sure that the student is aware that they do not have to engage or answer questions. So I think we were just trying to clarify that the motion speaks to an incident where a suspect being interviewed by police is something that we have very infrequent occurrences. And Assistant Principal Anderson is here and he can speak with more detail about that if there's a follow-up question.
Thank you. Whoops, there we go. Thank you for that. There were a couple substantive parts to the proposal, I guess. One of the substantive parts is effectively the assignment of an additional advocate, as I understand the intent of the clause, which would sit perhaps with, notwithstanding whether parents or community members or principal are not present, would be effectively a third party at all such interviews, which I guess would occur on school premises. The point taken about with respect to the rarity is understood. Is that the staff's understanding as well? Is that this would call for effectively a third party to be provided by the board?
I'll start off perhaps, and then Superintendent Farish can add. Essentially, yes, because it's seeking an advocate who is not involved in the decision to escalate the police. So, ostensibly that takes out the school administration from consideration, assuming they operate more or less as a team. To build on what Superintendent Farish was saying, a questioning of a student who may become or is accused of a crime for the purpose of gathering evidence by the police does not happen on school property. It's not that it couldn't, I suppose, but that would be by very special arrangement. So, police do have conversations with students where they may be asking questions, but that's not for the purpose of gathering evidence. That's more for the purpose of immediately resolving a situation that has happened in the school. So perhaps there's some confusion there in how we're reading that. But yes, we'd have to conceive of what this individual would be and what their training would be. Essentially, this is the role of the parents, and the parents would, with the student, engage whatever kind of legal representation they felt best in the event of an actual interview where they were being questioned for the purpose of gathering evidence.
Okay, very, very useful, and perhaps what I'm hearing is a near impossible rarity of this, and so maybe de facto moot effect of this addition of the clause. I guess I'll hear from the mover and listen to the debate. I guess the rarity could cut both ways. One could argue it's so rare, why include this? One could perhaps equally, and I'll listen, equally argue, if it has happened or might happen in those circumstances, would it really be a financial impact to provide such an advocate if it ever did happen? Anyway, I'll listen to the debate, but I just did want to clarify the staff understanding here. That's useful. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. Moving to Trustee Boothby.
Thank you, and thank you for that clarification. I'm still really puzzled and troubled by this one. So I see in the part of the clause that has not yet been modified or proposed to be modified, it talks about when police are required to be present in school. So can I have an idea of when that might be? I mean, and part of the answer, does the school, can they just say to a police person, no, you can't come in here and conduct that. You have to take it off site. Are we under an obligation to facilitate any sort of interview between a police officer and a student?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair, I'll do my best to answer that. Typically, police are only present on school property when they have been called to respond to an incident. Often it is by the school administration following some very clear guidelines that are continuing to evolve. Sometimes it has happened as a result of a parent or a neighbor or some other witness contacting police that an incident has occurred or is occurring at a school. And so those are the reasons why the police would attend. Interviews for the gathering of evidence from some students who are likely to be accused of something are typically arranged by appointment sort of affairs. There have been situations where police have made arrangements to interview students at school. Typically, they are not ones who are facing possible charges. They are, in fact, witnesses. And sometimes it's a situation where the home is not the safest place. And so those circumstances, we do see students interviewed. It is again by arrangement, and we work with a student to identify an appropriate caring adult. But they're not often any of the situations of which I'm aware. And you may recall, I was the Safe Schools lead from 2010 through to whenever until Principal Anderson really took over. Was that it was very rare, a couple of instances, and it was by arrangement, by appointment, days in advance, and we were able to have supporting adults present.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess my concern about this is in the instance that you just described, okay, we have an opportunity and we have time to get all our ducks in a row. We may not have that same kind of opportunity. And I'm frankly concerned in the scenario that the interview, if you will, or a potential interview would seem to be more benign, but in the course of the interview takes a very different pathway because of information that's coming out potentially of the interview. And I'm just troubled, as we've talked about, we want schools to be safe places for children. And I'm just worried that we would be in a position to facilitate police in school questioning children, whether they think they're a perpetrator or just a witness. All of that concerns me because I think it can turn on the head very quickly. And I also take note of the highlighted comment here, recognizing the historic harms that are experienced. I think that that's a particular note, regardless of the reason for a potential interview. So I'm troubled about this, but I'm also troubled about putting our staff in a position of having to be somebody who is familiar with the rights of students and can basically advise the student, because I don't think we have that kind of staff. So I'll go back on the list, please.
No problem, Trustee Boothby. And we're going to go to Deepika.
That's amazing, Keith. Thank you. So I'd actually like to hear from the staff how they interpret the rights of students and families, recognizing the historic harms experienced by marginalized communities. So how are you interpreting that? What does that mean to you? The language in the gray highlight is very specific. In one place, so it's suspect questioning. So now we've moved from police at schools talking with students to suspect questioning. So that's kind of raising a few flags for me. And I would also like to know, when we talk about an advocate for a student, what is the criteria for an advocate and that a district would provide, and how is that advocate equipped to handle this situation?
So through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of things there. I think in terms of better understanding the historic relationship between the police as an institution and some of our marginalized communities is something that we're continuing to learn more about. We're certainly trying to take steps to recognize it, and we've seen that through some of the work that's happened over the last year or so in particular. It's ongoing, and I would not dare say that we have it correct, but through the consultation on police involvement in schools and the SRO program, we heard a many stories and testimonials of impacts and harm and trauma, and those were taken into account in decisions by the board and subsequent staff actions following that. In terms of your specific questions around suspect counts, suspect questioning and advocate, those were that's the language of the mover, of the trustee mover. So really, it wouldn't be appropriate, for staff to comment on it, other than how we're interpreting it as we read it. And again, just to point out, by the time, if I'm interpreting suspect questioning correct, which is now the police believe that the student may be facing some kind of criminal action charges as a result of what they have discovered at the school, it's at that point police are to, and generally do, and Principal Anderson or Superintendent Farish may be able to comment further, they stop any line of questioning or conversation, because now they have to be very careful in how they proceed. The student would have to be cautioned. They'd have to have appropriate representation present. Otherwise, any evidence that they gather cannot really be used in a criminal proceeding. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make around suspect questioning in particular. If it looks like that individual is now going to be the subject of a police investigation, police discontinue any conversation, because what they've gained up to that point really isn't evidentiary. And then they have to follow a whole other very strict process to make sure that whatever information they gather is usable. And that does not happen in the school. So sorry, I can't quite answer your specific questions around subject questioning or advocate, unless it was just on how I or other staff are interpreting that.
Well, for instance, if this proposed change was passed, what would the criteria for an advocate be, and how would you go about preparing an advocate for this role?
Well, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I guess as I read it now, if this were passed as is, there would quite possibly be no change in our operations whatsoever, because that subject questioning of students would not be happening at the school under our care. So I can't see off the top of, based on situations I've encountered where we would need to enlist an advocate that would be something that the parent or the guardian or the adult student would arrange through legal aid or something of that. And it would happen outside of the school, outside of, off the property by arrangement, typically at a police station, but not always.
So that's not how I'm reading this at all. What I'm reading is that if a student is being questioned by the police, the district shall provide an advocate. So I don't know if I'm misreading it, or if that wasn't the intention, or if that was the intention, I'm not sure, but.
Ms. Deepika, the questions that you're asking, it's very difficult for the administration to answer because they're not the originator of the amendment.
I understand, yes.
But any speculation on their part would be well, speculative. What I would suggest is that if the mover could address this in her wrap-up, that would be the most appropriate response. And she is, I believe she's noted your question for that. So
Thank you.
thank you very much. And moving on to Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify one thing for those who may not have been party to all of the preceding discussions in our earlier meetings on this policy, and that is that the language recognizing the historic harms experienced by marginal communities was brought forward as an amendment previously and has been incorporated. So that language is not up as part of this amendment. It has already been incorporated into the draft policy. In terms of the proposed amendment, which is the part highlighted in blue, I think it's really problematic here because if we're talking about things that happen in schools, I guess what I'm hearing from staff is that these kinds of interviews, as a general rule, do not happen in schools and only happen with pre-arrangement, where the school is the only location that would work. Am I correct in that?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. That's certainly my understanding. Principal Anderson or Superintendent Farish, do you just want to verify the statements I've made?
Through you, Chair. Principal Anderson, please. Thank you.
Yes, definitely agree with the Associate Director. Questioning by police for gathering of evidence towards potential charges under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Just I can't think of an instance in the last 4 years where that has happened. There may have been previous ones that were arranged, but it just generally isn't an issue in schools. That happens outside of schools with pre-arrangement with parents and the opportunities to arrange for legal counsel, and happens at police stations generally.
Thank you. That's all I needed to know.
Thank you very much. And Trustee Lyra, would you is it okay if Trustee Boothby gives her second time and then you can have the wrap up at the end? Is that okay?
I think there are a couple of important points of clarification about this amendment that are going to help enlighten people to make a decision or to spark further discussion.
Okay, so what you're saying is you want to just to make a few points and then Trustee Boothby can go after you, right? Okay.
Yeah. So I think the first most important thing to recognize is that this is not amending 4.11. It's inserting a new clause after 4.11, which would become 4.12. So the word advocate was chosen because it's not intended to be a person who is a lawyer. It is intended to be a person who has a general understanding of legal background or of legal rights of a student, who can tell the student, here are your rights, you don't have to answer questions, etc. Because while there is a standing belief that police are required to inform students of their rights, police are allowed to lie. And I don't entirely trust the police to inform every student of all of their rights every time. And so this, in my eyes, is intended as a safeguard to prevent those kinds of abuses of power. So if, as the Associate Director says, we never need, like this never comes into effect because there are no suspect questionings at the school, then I see no reason not to put this into place. And then there was another question about, sorry, I wrote down the advocate one and there was a second one.
Was it the term subject questioning?
Ah, yes, thank you. So the suspect questioning is pulled from the memorandum of police school, the provincial memorandum of police school interactions, which specifically differentiates between students who are being questioned as a suspect and students who are not. And the fact that this exists in the provincial memorandum that goes out to create the school board police interactions indicates it is something that they suspect could happen or might happen. And if it does happen in our schools, we need these kinds of safeguards.
Okay, thank you very much, Trustee Lara. And we're going to Trustee Boothby.
Thank you. So I sort of appreciate what the mover is trying to do here, but I don't think it gets us to where we are, and I'm concerned that it puts forth the idea that this can happen. But I'm also concerned unless we were to go and have some type of child advocate, a real child advocate on standby, we're putting our teachers, administrators, somebody in the school staff in a really untenable situation. Because what I may think as a parent was proper information for a child, that advocate may not have thought of the same things that I would have or addressed it in the same way. I have real difficulty supporting this, and I would, frankly, I can't support it. And I would much rather see something in here as a new clause or attached to 411 that talked more about the notion of no interview of any kind shall be conducted by police on school property unless such interview is required by law or agreed to by a parent or guardian. And I agree with Ms. Grover's, what I think is her question and her concern about the suspect word. And I understand what the mover, how the mover pulled it. But as I said before, I'm worried that a friendly chat could turn around and become a not so friendly chat. And then where are we with respect to that? So I can't support this, and I'll think about raising this other amendment, because if this so infrequently happens, and unless we're absolutely needing to do this, I don't think school is the place that we should be allowing these kinds of interviews. And I'm really troubled about putting our staff in the middle of police and parents and trying to advise children of their rights, and then potentially being in deep trouble with a parent or a guardian because their advice is not what the advice of the parent or the guardian will be. So I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Boothby. And we're going to Trustee Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo exactly what Trustee Boothby said. I'm in full agreement with what she has stated. My only question to perhaps the mover, when you're talking about the advocate in this circumstance, the way it currently reads is that this could in fact be interpreted that there would be an advocate that would attend with the student and go potentially to the along with them to an interview away from school property. And that's certainly how I've interpreted reading this, that it isn't just on school premises. So is that was that the intent of you as the mover, that there would be an advocate that would be assigned by the board?
Go ahead, Trustee Lara, and if you could answer.
No, the intent was when students or if students are questioned on school property, where we have a higher obligation to help our students, then
Okay. Okay, so then I'll just simply say I agree with everything that Trustee Boothby said. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Grover, you still have your hand up? Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
Sorry?
I was just apologizing. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So Trustee Scott, could you just take the chair for a second?
I will do so, and please go ahead, Trustee Penny.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to say that I recognize where Trustee Lara is coming from. She is concerned about students. Undoubtedly, it looks like her amendment comes from a deep level of knowledge about things. However, I do find the language to be way too specific, awkward, very, very prescriptive, and really covering a very specific instance that, and we might find ourselves in a situation where the policy doesn't cover it because this language is way too specific. I don't think that coming from the basis where we need to put this in because we're not trusting police, I really think that's a really bad basis for putting our policy forward, that we're not trusting anyone, so we have to put all these things in. I think that is a recipe for not a very good way to think about things. I can't see hiring an advocate where we have such great needs throughout the system, where on the very rare occurrence that we need one, that meanwhile the advocate is not, they're hired to be an advocate and they're not doing, really, they wouldn't be, I don't know what they would be doing actually, when in fact, look around and look at the amount of people that we need in this board and how many absences we have of EAs and teachers right now, where, we're getting reports of so many teachers and educators absent from schools right now. So I just can't see doing that. Also, I really can't see a staff member getting in between things, just as Trustee Boothby said, and telling a peace officer that you're not going to be questioning that student right now until an advocate arrives. I really can't see them getting in the way of, especially that, of telling, of dictating to the, even though this rarely happens or it never happens, I really think it is not right for us to ask that of our staff. So anyway, just those are my thoughts. And so with that.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. And we have Trustee Jenkins, Suzanne Lyon, and Lily Miller on the list.
Okay. All right, so go ahead, Trustee Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Penny. To be honest, I'm a little shocked and a little bit, well, not a little bit, I'm very concerned about Trustee Lyra's comment about we cannot trust the police. I mean, I think that's a shocking statement. And I think that can lead us down a very dangerous path. I do appreciate Trustee Lyra's goal, but in protecting the students. But again, we are a board, our mandate is education. We're not legal experts, we're not healthcare experts. So the word advocate is too general. What happens if that advocate gave poor legal, even if it's a slight comment or suggestion, what happens if that comment was completely off base and brought negative actions towards the student. I won't support this amendment. I think I appreciate the direction, but I think it's a dangerous precedent, and I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Jenkins. And we're going to Ms. Lyon.
Thank you very much. I wanted to start out by saying that this specific issue has not been discussed by PIC members. However, as the PIC representative, it falls to me to represent the interests of the Parent Involvement Committee, which has a purpose to more fully involve parents in their children's education. So following up on what Ms. Grover said and what Trustee Lyra has mentioned, one of the things that obviously would be paramount to any parent or guardian of a child in this situation is ensuring that their child is protected in that kind of a situation where they are being interviewed either for whatever reason by police, when they are being interviewed by police on school property. So I'm in support of the idea of having someone with a student if they are being interviewed or questioned by police. I wanted to also comment on the whole issue of trust in police, and as well Ms. Grover's support of the comments about marginalized communities. While I understand that there are many people who come from a place of being excellent parents and excellent teachers and excellent trustees, there are significant numbers of students in the board who come from backgrounds that have been historically not well served by police, who have valid reasons for not having confidence or trust in the way they might be treated by police. As the parent of a young man who's not white, I can tell you that it's very much a topic of discussion on an ongoing basis in our house, and it has been since he was a young child. So I without debating the specific language and wordsmithing the proposed new section, I support the idea of it. And I think that it's important for everybody to recognize the reasons why Trustee Lyra would be bringing this forward. Whether, we could debate the language for a long time, but I think the core of that needs to remain. Thank you.
Very much. And moving on to Ms. Miller.
Hi, thank you. I really wanted to lift up Trustee Boothby's words when she spoke about the concern for the children. And like that's really what it comes down to here. And that I think is Trustee Lyra's purpose for this amendment. And whatever one has to do to make that the priority, that should just be the front of mind. And I really liked Trustee Boothby's alternative amendment there to make it more broad. As for not trusting the police, please try to see this through the lens of people who, as it says in this policy, have been historically and presently harmed by the police. And to expect for there to be trust is, I don't understand how some of you can't understand that. And even just recently, the interim chief admitted that there's systemic racism within the police force, which is great, but it's also concerning. And that systemic can come from procedures that they take when they interview students, like Trustee Lyra said, we're just going to have a conversation here, and then it turns, right? So there are different tactics that is used, and there is not the trust there. And the trust has to be earned, not just assumed. And this policy and all the other policies that you are going to review, you need to try to see it through that lens of a minoritized, marginalized people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. Moving on to Trustee Ellis.
Hi, thank you. I find this very similar to, or I liken it to the integrity commissioner that we as trustees have allocated for ourselves. We have a person on retainer so that if the trustees have questions of efficacy, conflict of interest, we have someone with that knowledge to approach. I see this very similar. If we're willing to do it for us as trustees, I have no problem at all having an advocate on retainer for students and to help them navigate a complex world. And especially for newcomers and their families who may not understand all of the nuances of our education or of our legal system, an advocate there to advise them through the process, I think would be very helpful. As well, this is some very specialized knowledge and how to deal with things. So someone with that training, if we could have them on retainer to come and assist the board and its students when necessary, would be very helpful. As well as, as I said, it's a very intricate, and to think that all of our principals and vice principals should have this knowledge at their fingertips, I think is asking more. I think there are better ways for them to spend their time than to know this. And as well, they can be a principal, staff can be put in conflict if they are, they may be participants in this process, which would give them a conflict of interest as well. I'm just trying to figure out how we can support our students as best as we can and our staff and not put them in impossible situations. So I'm in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Ellis. Going on to Trustee Bella Biv, you are a first-time speaker, so we'll go to you first, and then we'll go to Trustee Blackburn, who's also a first-time speaker.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak to this, but because there's been so many great voices, Lily, you've echoed a lot of what I've heard in my conversations with ACE members and others regarding this. I try to put myself in the position that if my daughter or whoever was in high school and involved in something and I didn't know, and the police happened to be there to investigate and wanted to chit chat. Did you hear? Maybe not official questioning. I think we're talking about a chit chat that can turn into information that would be shared without having an understanding of what your rights are when it comes to that. or if I think about me going there as a mom and standing beside my daughter or or another child, and I don't know what the rights are. So if there was someone who was on retainer, an advocate who was familiar, not just any teacher that you pull out of the classroom, a person that has been officially trained to let me know what the basics are with my child speaking to this police officer, or that my child understands I don't have to speak to this police officer at all right now because there's someone who's looking out for my best interest in that case. That to me seems like a very reasonable situation. And I would hope that as a school, if this is going to happen, thank you, Boothby. I hope that this wouldn't happen in the school, but I think we know that situations do happen in the school where police do need to be called in. And if they do need to be called in and they're going to be speaking to a child, let's make sure that we have someone who is available to be there to support that child and explain to them their rights. I really support this, Lyra. I don't know if the wording is perfect, but I think the great experts that we have in our department right here that will be able to figure it out in procedure and ensure that the advocate is adequately trained. And I would look to Human Rights Advisor Tanner as well to support that process, to make sure that it happens in the right way, so that especially with those that do not have trust with the police, that they feel and are supported by us in those situations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bell. Going to Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I won't be supporting this amendment for some of the reasons that have been stated by my colleagues. I don't think comparing the work of our integrity commissioner to what potentially could be an advocate is appropriate. To me, it's apples and oranges. When we submit something to the integrity commissioner, it could take days to answer. Situations that happen in schools, if it needs police involvement, it's most likely a pretty serious situation that would need to be dealt with pretty expeditiously. And to the notion that we would have somebody somewhere ready to drop everything and go to wherever a student is to advocate for them, it just seems highly unrealistic that somebody would take on this position to do very little work. As far as trust in the police, of course, there are some people who don't trust in the police. There are lots of people who don't trust in the school system. But we're still here and we're still fighting to make it the best system we can. And I have no doubt that the Police Service of Ottawa is doing the exact same thing, as is every other organization who has issues of systemic racism or any systemic discrimination, be it Islamophobia or homophobia or transphobia. I think every organization is striving to do better. But if there is a mistrust, the solution is to ascertain what we can do to build that trust, not to encourage the mistrust. We should be about building bridges in this district. And I would also go back, echo what Trustee Jenkins stated. We are first and foremost an educational institution. We're not a legal assistance place. There are lots of agencies in the community that can assist people with legal issues, and that's where that should be placed. It shouldn't be an employee or a contractor of paid for by the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board who performs performs those duties, particularly when what we've heard from staff is that this happens so infrequently, and we're having this grand debate for who knows how long about something that happens once in a blue moon.
Thank you, Trustee Blackburn. And there is a first-time speaker, Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm hearing in the discussion is that there's a great deal of support for the intent of this amendment, but a great deal of problem with the way that it has been expressed and the way that it might be implemented. I would respectfully suggest that rather than continuing to thrash over something which clearly is not expressed in a way that it can gain a lot of support this evening, that it might be prudent simply to withdraw the amendment, rephrase, and bring a different amendment, which would incorporate the same intent when the policy comes to board, if it gets to board. It's already 5 after 10. We still have a number of additional amendments to consider. And I just think that we're sort of working around something which has good intent, not great language, and we should move on and rethink the language outside of the meeting. Thank you.
So very good suggestion, Trustee Scott. And I know that it's a little bit irregular, but I'm going to ask Trustee Lyra what she thinks of that proposal.
If folks want to workshop the language with me, I have no problem with that. I would have no problem. My recollection is I can't just withdraw things without the consensus of the board.
Yes, you're quite correct. If you wish to withdraw this amendment, it would need a vote from the board to allow you to withdraw it. But for the reasons that Trustee Scott put forward, I think that would be no issue if you wanted to do that.
Sure. I have no problem withdrawing this motion, rehashing the language, and bringing it back at a future time.
Okay. And so I know this is a bit of unusual procedurally, but I agree with Trustee Scott that going over this and over this, it's been 3 meetings. So Trustee Lyra is agreed that she would withdraw and look at the language. And so we do need unanimous consent on this. So what I'm going to do is ask everyone, if there's a trustee that disagrees that it should be withdrawn, please speak up or raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, do we need unanimous consent? Could you please double check that?
Executive officer on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, section 12.10 of the bylaws does state that we require unanimous consent to withdraw.
All right, so again, I ask the question, if there is a trustee that disagrees with Trustee Lyra withdrawing this amendment, please speak up or raise your hand. Trustee Campbell, is your hand raised to disagree?
Sorry, no, thank you.
A legacy hand? Okay, legacy artifact. All right, so Trustee Lyra, your amendment has been withdrawn for now, but following Trustee Scott's advice, I would encourage you to work with everyone to try to bring it forward in a different forum, if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on. We have just a little bit of time left, and we have a chance of getting this finished. Yay! So I'm going to page 1, where there are still amendments of the proposed amendments to the Safe Schools policy, and that is on P.125.SCO Code of Conduct Policy, and that is Trustee Bell. I noticed in the staff notes that it says incorporated in the draft. So Trustee Bell.
I can't hear you, Keith.
Sorry about that. I noticed that when I put my chat thing on the side that the pressing the space bar doesn't work anymore. So anyway, so we're on number 1, Trustee Bell. It says incorporated in the draft. So does that conform to the language that you wish to put forward?
Yes, it does.
All right.
Can I just say a couple of words, and hopefully this will help speed along all of the proposed recommendations that we have, which is these amendments have been put forth by our ACE colleagues. They came after they saw that there was really great and fluid input that was accepted on behalf of the Indigenous Education Council, and that other trustees had brought forth so many amendments that were in line with their thinking. There were just a couple of additional ones that have particularly to do with accountability and ensuring inclusion in the policies that they have brought forth. And that would be my overview for all of the amendments, but I'm happy to go through with them one by one, Chair, if you so desire. And we also have Deepika here from ACE to speak to it as well.
No problem, Trustee Bell, but you know, our procedure on the other ones was simply ask if they're friendly. You know, if it's accepted, then that's yes for an answer. It's a good thing, right? So, so let's take proposed amendment number 1. If this is not friendly, please speak out or raise your hand. All right, sounds like that one is accepted. So let's move on to amendment number 2. Trustee Bell, does that wording that is there, does that comply with what you want as your amendment?
Yes, yes, it does, Chair.
And that is on policy section 9.1. All right, and I do note that there's a staff note on it. However, I'm going to ask a question. If this is not friendly, please speak up or raise your hand.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
May I haven't decided if it's friendly or not. May I have a staff comment, please?
Yes, go. I think that is appropriate.
Thank you.
Can I ask Executive Officer Giroux to make a comment on the difference between shall and may?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks very much. I think in this particular case, I don't think there's a problem with the change from shall or may. There was some concern in an earlier staff conversation about whether or not that interfered with the reporting of a complaint about a principal or SO. But practically speaking, and Trustee Bell and I have discussed possible additional language, but practically speaking, I don't think that's necessary. As an example, and this is the example I used with the trustee, if an employee in another department in the organization felt uncomfortable reporting a breach to their immediate supervisor or within their department, and they came to me to report the breach, I would still have an obligation under the confines of this policy to bring that forward. And so although we expect, you know, some structure, the more important thing is that we have a process for reporting. And so the may and shall piece, I don't think changes the ability to report a complaint about a principal or SO. And so I think that the change in language is fine.
And it's friendly for me.
All right, so I'll ask again, if this is not friendly, please speak up or raise your hand. And hearing no objections, it's accepted. And moving on to number 3, This is in section 9(1)(a). And it's line number 3. And it's incorporated in the draft. And does that encompass that your intended change, Trustee Bell?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. And so if this is not friendly, please speak up or raise your hand. Not hearing anything, so that's accepted. Moving on to line number 4, and that's section 9(1)(b), incorporated in the draft, and that is what you wanted to put forward, Trustee Bell?
Correct, it is.
Thank you very much. And so if this is not friendly, please speak up or raise your hand. Not hearing any objections, so this is good. Moving on to line number 5 on page 291D. And that, does that encompass your amendment that's on the page, Trustee Trustee Bell?
Yes, that it would become a standalone clause 9.2.
Okay. And so if this is not friendly, please speak up or raise your hand. And that is friendly and accepted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bell. And I'm going through the chart and I can see no further amendments that are put forward at this time. Should have said that anyway. So with that, we're going to go back to the mover, which is, you know, that was 4 meetings ago. Who is the mover? Does someone please?
Trustee Schwartz.
Oh, Trustee Lyra, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to reiterate my request to vote on 5.15 separately from the other parts of the policy, because that was also 3 meetings ago.
Yes. And Trustee Lyra, my read of this and the read of our bylaws talks about voting on separate parts of a motion, not on separate parts of a policy. And I did consult also Robert Rules of Order, and this also talks about parts of a motion. It does not talk about separating voting on a parts of a policy. And so I'm going to have to rule your request out of order.
I understand your ruling, and I do not believe you have made the correct ruling, and I'd like to challenge that.
All right. I would like to, I'm going to put forward to the rest of the trustees. My ruling is that we can't have separate votes on individual pieces of policy, and by, under the rules of procedure, I am allowed to explain why I made that ruling. And that is in our bylaws. It does not talk about making separate votes for different parts of a policy. As you can imagine, it's quite impractical in my view, because what happens if it's defeated? Do we go back to the original policy, or is the line removed? It's a very, very difficult question. In addition, our policies are not constructed to be clause by clause, so that you can simply remove one and have it stand. In addition, in Robert's Rules of Order, when it talks about separating motions, it talks about only if the individual parts are independent. And I do see that there's a high degree of interconnectedness in this policy, and the results of removing one would be unpredictable. So those are my reasons. And so with that, I'm going to ask for call the question on.
Do I not get to explain my side?
It doesn't talk to that in Robert Rules of Order. It only talks about one.
Oh.
But go ahead, just to be fair.
Sure. So the motion on the floor is to pass the policy, but I view us as starting a policy as a blank document and putting in clause by clause by clause. I would like to support the vast majority of this policy, but I cannot support a policy. And I did try and amend it repeatedly, but I cannot support the policy with the clause as it has been passed by the board. And so rather than show a lack of support for the majority of this policy because of this one line, I would like to vote on the one part I find objectionable separately. We have a blank document in front of us and we are filling it one line at a time. I think that the chair's rationale that you cannot remove one line from a policy is ridiculous. We amend, merge, and remove clauses to all of our policies every time we look at them. And so I think that the chair has made the wrong decision.
Mr. Chair, may I have a point of order, please?
Yes, Trustee Blackburn, go ahead.
So there's two things. I respectfully submit that a trustee saying something that you said, referring to it as ridiculous, is disrespectful, and I would ask that the trustee withdraw that.
Do I get the floor?
Trustee Lara?
No, I just asked if she withdraw it. I'm not asking for a debate. If you're not prepared to withdraw it, that's fine, and then I'll go on to my point of order.
Trustee Lara?
Ridiculous was perhaps not the best word. Given more time, I would come up with a better one. I will withdraw the word ridiculous.
Thank you, Trustee Evans. On a point of order, the chair has stated what our bylaws state. I don't understand how we can be voting on whether or not we like our bylaws. Obviously, we would be going down this is not a new policy. This is a policy that we are amending. This is not a new policy. We've had a safe schools policy, I'm sure, since schools opened, or for a very, very long time, probably that predates me. So I don't understand how we can, if we go down this road, we can do this to every policy. It's going to be even worse than it already is. So I'd like a comment from the executive officer or somebody that I don't understand. How can you challenge the chair on what the bylaws state is the rules?
Well, what I would suggest, Trustee Blackburn, instead of a point of order, maybe we should seek some advice from executive officer.
Okay, I think that's what I just said. If I phrased it as, if phrasing it as a point of order was the inappropriate thing to do, I apologize. I guess I'm just flabbergasted that we could possibly go down this road.
All right, it is worthwhile to seek some advice on executive officer on whether, on the appropriateness of my ruling or the precedence of it. So executive officer.
I'm happy to speak to what the rules of procedure and what Kerr and King say and what the process is to navigate through. And so both the rules of procedure and Kerr and King speak to how to divide a compound motion. And in this case, you have a compound motion before you, and that's outlined in A, B, and C. What the trustee has requested is to divide out a section of the policy and to vote on that section separately. And that specific section of the policy is not part of the motion, but rather embedded within the broader context of the motion. I did, in discussion with the chair today on this topic, go through Kerr and King to verify whether or not there were any other provisions. And there is a provision in section 154 about considering a complex motion clause by clause. But that section actually outlines the process that we've already been through, which is a committee of the whole debate on the content of the substantive elements of the motion clause by clause, i.e. the policy itself. And so I think the motion to divide out that section is not in order. And I think that the trustee has several other avenues to express their concern. The trustee can do that by making their concerns known and having those in the record. And the trustee has made the concerns known both earlier in this meeting and in the meeting tonight. And we can clearly document that in the minutes. the trustee can abstain or the trustee can vote against the motion. So those are the avenues that are available. In terms of a challenge to the chair, there is a mechanism in the bylaws to challenge the chair. Trustee Evans or Lyra has every right to challenge the chair. The chair has made clear what his ruling is. And the question now is whether or not the ruling of the chair shall be upheld. The vote should be called immediately and without debate. The chair does not vote on the appeal. The decision of the chair is upheld on a tie or a majority of votes cast.
All right, so with that, I'm going to call the question. Shall the chair's ruling be upheld?
Blackburn in favor.
Boothby in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Jenkins in favor.
Ellis in favor.
Bell in
And
favor.
Scott in favor.
those opposed?
Lyra opposed.
And so the chair's ruling is upheld, Trustee Lyra. But as Executive Officer had pointed out, there are several avenues for you to make the changes that you wish. And we are going over this again in boards. So, and with that, I'm going to go to Trustee Campbell to provide a wrap up for this.
Sorry, I thought that Trustee Schwartz had introduced, or do I forget now?
Trustee Schwartz.
Sorry, my mistake.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'd believe you if you told me.
This was such a long time ago that
Okay.
I was
so
going to say,
Trustee
if Trustee Campbell wishes to give a wrap up, or if anyone else does, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think given the late hour and the fact that we've debated this policy at length, along with the other policies, all of the recommendations that are in front of us, I do hope that colleagues will support the recommendations, and that I'm sure we will once again try and tackle parts of this at board. But in the meantime, I do hope that we all have support for the motion in front of us this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you very much, Trustee Schwartz. And with that, I'm going to call the question on this motion. All those in favor?
Boothby in favor.
Bell in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Blackburn in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Jenkins in favor.
Scott in favor.
Any in favor? And those opposed?
Lyra opposed.
And thank you very much. That passes.
Abstentions, Chair?
Oh, sorry, abstentions?
Ellis abstains.
All right. Thank you very much, Trustee Ellis. Sorry about that. All right. And with that, we just have a couple more items on our agenda for the continuation meeting. The Special Education Advisory Committee of 5th of January call for a mover to receive the report. Trustee Ellis, thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions to this report? Seeing none, I'd like to call the question on receipt. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you. That passes. And Parent Involved Committee of January 19th. I'd like to call for a mover to receive the report. Trustee Blackburn, thank you very much. Are there any errors and or omissions? Seeing none, I'd like to call the question on receipt. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you very much. That passes. And moving on, is there any new business information or inquiries? And seeing none, it is 10:30 and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. And have a good evening, everyone.